Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Nick Newman is going to be in a lot of trouble. He might have an affair. This is because Nick Newman has a drug problem, and it is getting worse. Will Nick Newman's drug problem cause some problems in his love life? Nick Newman had surgery. When he woke up, he was in a lot of pain because of his bad leg. So Nick Newman got medicine to help with the pain. This is when people started to think that Nick Newman might have a problem with drugs. What happened on January 15th is really scary. Now I think Nick is going to have a problem with painkillers. Nick took some pills. He already knows he will need more soon. But Nick just got out of the hospital. It has not even been one day. At this rate, Nick is going to get into trouble with drugs. This is news for Nick and his relationship with Sharon Newman. Nick and Sharon Newman are going to have problems because of Nick's problem with painkillers. Nick and Sharon are not together officially. It is clear that they're getting close again. They seem to be going to the way things were when they were romantic. The problem is that Nick might get too caught up in taking pills, and that could hurt his relationship with Sharon. If Sharon notices that something is wrong and feels like Nick is pushing her away, things could get bad. Nick might make some mistakes, end up with someone else. If that happens, there are things that could happen to Nick and Sharon. Nick and Sharon's situation is complicated. It is hard to say what will happen next with Nick and Sharon. One thing that could happen is that Nick falls for Phyllis Summers. You see, people often get confused when they are really mad at someone they care about. Nick is really mad at Phyllis Summers. He is furious with Phyllis Summers because of what she did with Kane Ashby and that thing with Newman Enterprises. Sometimes when people are angry, it can actually be a sign that they have strong feelings for each other. So it is possible that Nick and Phyllis Summers will give in to their feelings for each other at some point. Another thing that could happen is that Nick and Sienna Bacall get together. Nick and Sienna Bacall might end up in bed together, which would be a deal for Nick and Phyllis Summers. If the show YNR goes that way, Nick could mess up Noah Newman's relationship with Sienna. He could also hurt his relationship with his son at the same time. There were some clues that Sienna had a brother who passed away. It probably had something to do with taking many drugs. We might see Sienna try to help Nick. Then she could start to like him. This could make things really complicated. Sienna and Nick might get too close to each other. Whatever the case, Nick is seemingly headed down a drug-addicted path, so stick with us for updates on all the chaos that'll lead to. Nick's entering a difficult new chapter that'll inevitably have some stunning consequences. Nick Newman's life. Nick, long portrayed as a flexible, battle-scarred survivor of family wars, commercial backstabbings, and emotional bouleversement, no way imagined that his topmost trouble would come not from an adversary across the boardroom table, but from a trusted figure who tampered with his most vulnerable moment, his health. As Nick plotted with moping pain from his injury, counting on specified drug to serve day by day, Sienna intimately switched his drug, replacing it with a more potent, addicting substance that sluggishly tensed its grip on him. The atrocity of the act lies not only in the exchange itself, but in the timing. Nick was formerly emotionally fragile, stretched thin by family pressures, undetermined trauma, and the constant weight of being a Newman. Sienna watched as the changes took hold, his forbearance adding, his dependence heightening, his formerly clear judgment clouded. Yet she said nothing, did nothing, and allowed the damage to helical estual of control. As weeks passed, Nick's jest came decreasingly erratic, his temper shorter, his focus scattered, and his connection strained, especially with those who knew him. Stylish and tasted commodity was terribly wrong. Sharon noticed the distant look in his eyes, the prostration that sleep no way sounded to cure, while Victoria saw advising signs in his reckless opinions and symptomatic volatility. Indeed, Victor, frequently eyeless to emotional nuance, tasted weakness and frustration in his son, though he originally chalked it up to stress rather than a medical treason of this magnitude. The tragedy unfolded in slow stir, with observers watching helplessly as Nick accounted his growing need for the capsules, averring he could stop any time, that the pain justified the lozenge, that he was still in control. Classic emblems of dependence that made the plot sorrowfully realistic and emotionally raw. Meanwhile, Sienna's motives remained shrouded in riddle. Fueling enterprise and outrage, was this an act of vengeance, a crooked attempt at control, or part of a larger, more minatory docket tied to power, plutocrat, or hidden alliances. Every scene she participated with Nick came retroactively nipping, as her concerned gandos and soft, spoken solace were revealed to be a mask for cold computation, making her treason one of the most disturbing in recent Y&R history. The moment of verity eventually shattered the vision when inconsistencies in Nick's tradition came to light, driving a chain response that exposed the tampering and refocused unmistakably to Sienna. The disclosure hit Nick like a punch to the gut, not just the horror of being addicted, but the soul-crushing consummation that his suffering had been finagled by someone he trusted. Rage, demotion, and despair collided as Nick brazened the reality of his condition, forced to reckon with how far he'd fallen and how vulnerable he'd truly been. The fallout gurgled through Genoa City incontinently, kindling fury in those who love him and setting the stage for explosive competitions. Victoria's wrathfulness burned white-hot, determined to see Sienna face consequences no matter the cost, while Sharon shifted into defensive mode, prompting Nick toward treatment and reminding him that dependence isn't a moral failure but a crack foisted and compounded by treason. Victor's response was predictably nuclear, promising retaliation and making it clear that anyone who designedly harms a Newman will pay a steep price, fairly or else. Yet amid the chaos, the most compelling element of the plot remains Nick's internal battle, the shame of dependence, the fear of pullout, and the long road back to himself. His struggle adds layers of complexity to his character, stripping down bravado and exposing vulnerability in a way that resonates deeply with observers who fate the literalism behind the drama. This isn't just a tale of ill, it's a sobering disquisition of how fluently trust can be weaponized and how snappily dependence can take hold when pain, physical and emotional, is exploited. Sienna's act has irrevocably altered the line of multiple lives, situating her as one of the most controversial antagonists the show has seen in times, while pushing Nick into a redemption bow that promises heartache, adaptability, and hard-earned stopgap. As the consequences continue to unfold, questions impend large. Will Nick find the strength to overcome his dependence and reclaim his life, or will the scars of Sienna's treason hang him ever? Will justice be served, or will Sienna slip down, leaving desolation in her wake? One thing is certain: this shocking drug exchange has reshaped the young and the restless geography, delivering a plot that's dark, emotional, and indelible, proving formerly again that in Genoa City, the most dangerous adversaries are frequently the bones closest to your heart. Nick Newman standing at the center of the coming emotional earthquake. What began as rumored rumors and uneasy ganders has entwined into a full-bloated extremity that threatens to shatter Nick's particular life, his family bonds, and his hard-won sense of stability. A shocking affair, long denied but decreasingly insolvable to ignore, collides headfirst with a dangerous medicine problem that Nick insists he has under control, but the substantiation suggests else. As the walls near in, observers are left asking the same haunting question: is Nick headed for his most painful romantic blow-up yet? Nick has always been the Newman who prides himself on moral clarity, the bone, who claims he's different from Victor's ruthless ambition or Adam's reckless tone destruction. Yet history has proven that when Nick feels cornered by guilt, fear, or undetermined trauma, he frequently makes choices that contradict everything he believes about himself. This time, the stakes feel indeed advanced. The alleged affair isn't just a transitory lapse in judgment. It's deeply entangled with his emotional vulnerability, his undetermined history, and a growing reliance on tradition medicines that may no longer be just for stress. Interposers in Genoa City have noticed the changes: Nick's shorter temper, his restless nights, the way he snaps at those closest to him, and the concave look in his eyes when he thinks no bone is watching. The medicines, originally framed as a managing medium, commodity to take the edge off the constant pressure of family wars, romantic query, and business drama, now feel to be controlling him rather than the other way around. And when dependence mixes with secretiveness, the fallout is no way clean. The affair itself carries all the emblems of a classic Y&R reproach: stolen moments, loaded exchanges, and a connection that crosses lines Nick formerly swore he'd no way cross. Whether the relationship began as emotional support during a vulnerable moment or as a reckless escape from responsibility, it has easily taken on a life of its own. Nick isn't just risking heartache. He's risking the trust of people who have stood by him through every storm: Sharon, his children, and indeed Nikki, who knows all too well how fluently a Newman man can helical when temptation meets weakness. What makes this situation especially unpredictable is how nearly the affair appears tied to Nick's medicine use. Each bad decision seems to fuel the coming, creating a dangerous cycle where guilt leads to capsules, capsules lower inhibitions, and lowered inhibitions lead right back into the arms of someone he shouldn't be with. It's a slow, stir train wreck, and the followership can feel it coming. Sharon, in particular, seems poised to come contributory damage. Her history with Nick is concentrated with love, treason, remission, and relapse, emotional and else, and the idea that Nick could formerly again peril their fragile peace is nearly unsupportable. Sharon has fought too hard for her own stability to be dragged into another Newman disaster, and if she senses that Nick is hiding both an affair and a substance problem, her response could be nippy and enduring. Meanwhile, Nick's children may soon notice that commodity is wrong. He's distracted, unreliable, and emotionally distant. Classic warning signs that YNR no way introduces without lucre. A battle, maybe touched off by a missed pledge or a public outburst, could force Nick to face the reality he's been denying, that he's no longer in control. And also there's Victor Newman, whose radar for weakness is fabulous. Victor may frame his concern as paternal instinct, but his interventions frequently come with strings attached. However, both he could use that information to manipulate Nick for his own good, kindling yet another explosive father-son clash if Victor learns about the medicines or the affair, or worse. Nikki, too, is uniquely deposited to see the verity, having walked her own painful path with dependence. Her disappointment could cut deeper than Victor's wrathfulness, and her warnings might be the last lifeline Nick has before everything collapses. The romantic blow-up everyone fears feels ineluctable because the secrets are piling up, and Genoa City thrives on disclosure. All it takes is one eavesdrop discussion, one lost lozenge bottle, or one betrayed nut pushed too far, and Nick's precisely constructed facade will deteriorate. When the verity comes out, it won't just end a relationship, it will force Nick to defy the interpretation of himself he's been running from. Will he eventually admit he needs help, or will he double down on denial and lose everything in the process? The tragedy of Nick Newman is that he frequently recognizes the right choice just moments too late, and this plot feels poised to test him like no way ahead. A shocking affair alone would be enough to rock his world, but combined with a twisting medicine problem, it becomes a ticking time lemon, one that threatens not only love but identity, family, and heritage. As the young and the restless continues to peel back the layers of Nick's descent, observers are bracing for heartache, explosive competitions, and the kind of emotional reckoning that only this show can deliver. One thing is certain: when Nick's secrets eventually come to light, the fallout will be messy, painful, and indelible, and Genoa City may no way look at him the same way again. As Nick's downcast helical deepens, the emotional stakes in Genoa City rise to a fever pitch, transubstantiating what formerly looked like a private struggle into a public unraveling that no bone can ignore. The most unsettling part of Nick's situation isn't just the affair or the medicines on their own, but the way they intertwine, feeding off each other until the lines between desire, escape, and destruction fully blur. Nick has always justified his choices by telling himself he's guarding others, shielding his children from chaos, sparing Sharon gratuitous pain, avoiding another disastrous Newman family implosion. But the verity is far more uncomfortable. Nick may be using secretiveness as a reason to avoid responsibility. Every taradiddle he tells pushes him deeper into insulation, and every lozenge he takes dulls the voice of heart that formerly guided him. In classic Young and the Restless fashion, this isn't just a particular extremity, it's a ripple that threatens to destabilize nearly every relationship in his route. The affair itself becomes more dangerous by the day, not because of passion alone, but because of what it represents for Nick emotionally. This isn't a debonair fling, it's a connection born out of vulnerability, participated secrets, and collective damage. The woman at the center of the reproach understands Nick in ways that make him feel seen, understood, and temporarily acquitted of his miscalculations. That kind of emotional closeness is intoxicating, especially for someone formerly leaning on substances to manage. Each hassle reinforces the vision that he's set up a retreat from his problems, when in reality, he's only creating new bones. The further Nick leans into this interdicted relationship, the harder it becomes to walk down, indeed as the guilt eats him alive. He knows the fallout will be disastrous, yet he continues, nearly daring fate to expose him, because part of him believes he deserves whatever discipline comes. Sharon's growing apprehension is insolvable to ignore. She senses the shift in Nick's energy long before any concrete evidence shells. His evasiveness, his mood swings, the way he alternates between violent affection and emotional pullout, all of it sets off admonitions embedded in times of painful history. Sharon has lived through dependence, relapse, and treason, and she recognizes the patterns indeed when Nick refuses to admit them himself. Her concern snappily turns into frustration as Nick deflects her questions and minimizes her fears. The tragedy is that Sharon doesn't just sweat losing Nick romantically. She fears losing him to the same demons that have nearly destroyed them both in the history. When she eventually confronts him, the exchange is raw, emotional, and heartbreaking. Nick insists he's forfeiture, that he has everything under control, while Sharon sees the cracks spreading wider by the day. Meanwhile, Nick's children come silent substantiations to his unraveling. They may not understand the full compass of what's passing, but they feel the insecurity. Missed feasts, broken pledges, detracted exchanges, these small bummers accumulate, hanging the image of Nick as the reliable father he's always tried to be. One emotionally charged moment, maybe a child calling him out for not being present, could serve as a ruinous wake-up call. Or, just as likely, it could push Nick further into denial, persuading himself that deadening the pain is easier than facing the damage he's causing. The Young and the Restless has no way nestled down from showing how dependence impacts families, and Nick's plot feels poised to explore that verity with brutal honesty. Victor Newman's involvement only escalates the pressure. Victor has an uncanny capability to smell weakness, and Nick's erratic jest doesn't go unnoticed. What starts as probing questions snappily turns into advised pressure. Victor may authentically want to help his son, but his styles are infrequently gentle. However, he could weaponize that information under the guise of guarding the family if he uncovers substantiation of medicine use or an affair. The result is an explosive battle that reopens old injuries. Nick criminating Victor of control and manipulation, Victor criminating Nick of irresponsibility and moral failure. Their arguments cut deep, dredging up decades of resentment and unmet prospects. For Nick, the pain of Victor's judgment is compounded by the fear that his father might be right. Nikki's part in this unfolding disaster is, maybe, the most emotionally ruinous. As someone who has fought her own battles with dependence, Nikki sees through Nick's defenses with painful clarity. Her concern is motherly but firm, embedded in hard-earned wisdom rather than judgment. When she confronts Nick, it isn't with wrathfulness, but with heartache. She recognizes the familiar signs, the pretenses, the secretiveness, the asseveration that everything is under control, and it terrifies her. Nikki knows how snappily effects can helical, how one bad decision can lead to unrecoverable consequences. Her plea to Nick to seek help may be his last genuine lifeline, and the question becomes whether he's willing to take it or whether his pride will push him down. As the pressure mounts, the affair edges near to exposure. Genoa City thrives on coexistence and eavesdropped exchanges, and it feels ineluctable that someone will connect the blotches. A lost phone, a suspicious hassle, or a scorned third party could enkindle the explosion. When the verity eventually comes out, it won't arrive gently. The disclosure will be public, humiliating, and insolvable to spin. Sharon's response could range from icy resoluteness to raw desolation, but either way, the trust between them may be irreparably damaged. The woman involved in the affair may find herself blackened, while Nick stands at the center of the storm, forced to answer for every taradiddle he's told. The medicine problem, formerly exposed, adds another subcast of fallout. Suddenly,